Oh,
Haha, I have killed thee.
oh, oh, oh.
I even
And with
hit the
that,
camera with the Nerf dart.
and with that, welcome to this month's episode of the 800s. I am your deceased co-host Alex, and you just saw from my deadly co-host Adam. And as always, thank you for the man who keeps it alive in the background, Mr. Allen. All right, with that, why don't we do our quick top of the morning plugs, and then we'll get into it.
Sure thing. We are the DM's Table. If you would like to know more about us, head over to dmstable.com. Otherwise, I'd like to tell you about Incompetech. You heard some music before our pretty faces came on the screen. That was Fearless First by Incompetech. Brain fart. Holy cow. You should check out everything they have to offer and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io. Otherwise, uh, Alex, what are we here for?
All right, so this month on the 800s, we'll be discussing our beach read book, Casino Royale by Ian Fleming. The name's Bond, James Bond. Fleming's introduction to the legendary MI6 spy 007 takes us to a high-stakes baccarat game in the hills of northern France at the Royale Casino in order to bankrupt the Soviet spy and moneyman Le Chiffre with his companions from the CIA and other allies in Europe. Wink. Will Bond catch his prey, or will he fall to Lady Luck in the Casino Royale?
And if this is your first time joining us, first off, welcome. Second off, let me give you a rundown of how our show works. We are a discussion show. What that means is we're going to discuss the book. We will pick a topic or question. If you guys have anything that you would like to talk about, feel free to throw it into chat at any time. And when there's a lull in the conversation, we'll grab it and throw it up there for everybody to discuss. That's pretty much it. We'll just chit chat and discuss Casino Royale.
And remember, we're here to have a fun and supportive community, not be mean or derogatory or make people feel judged. So, in sum, be nice or fuck off. The name's off. Fuck off.
Nice, nice. Definitely should have gone with that. That was good. With that, let's get into the conversation. Alex, chat, Alan behind the scenes. What were your first impressions of Casino Royale?
Um, this is a weird one because going in, I think for most of us, at least in our generation, Bond was just kind of a fairly household name that everybody knew about, but it was generally speaking from the movies, not the books. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, people
Yeah.
might have known about it, but the movies are what most people know, so it's hard to go into this without doing that comparison. But I went into this being like, okay, this is probably going to be closer to like, noir than the films that I'm used to seeing. And I was kind of right, but it also definitely has its own feel. Like it is not noir, but it's definitely very much set in a different time. and, and once you get into that, it was kind of interesting to see what are the things that were considered spycraft back then, you know? So I found myself being really interested in like what are the little things that they considered, like what ultimate spies do. And it's things that I think that nowadays we might take for granted, like putting the string across or the piece of hair, across the doorway so that it snaps or whatever, and like making sure to check for bugs basically everywhere except for the vents, which to us might feel like an obvious place, but you know.
Yeah.
And it was I think it was really interesting to like it kind of sucked me in a way I wasn't expecting, but there are also elements of it where I was like, man, this is very 1950s, you know. So
Yeah.
it had pluses and minuses to it, but it was it. I understand why this is like the in the category of like page turners, and because you want to know what's coming next, and it had that quality to me.
Yeah. For me, like what I really liked about this book was the plot was very direct and laid out from the get-go. We open with he's here to stop him by stealing all of his money while gambling. And then that's the plot. Yeah. Uh,
Yep.
this book was very direct, and one thing I found myself really enjoying compared to the movies um pretty early on was the fact that we get kind of Bond's insights into the events going on, where in the movies he's always depicted as like this mysterious guy who somehow knows things, and he's got this way of knowing just the right thing to do. And with the book we get to see like, oh, what was his thought process, how did he get to the conclusion of where he was, and
Mhm.
what was going on behind the facade of James Bond. So I really liked that aspect and was curious to see how far Fleming would take it, and what he thought Bond should be,
Mhm.
as opposed to what Hollywood thought Bond should be.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like Storm Reed, welcome, by the way. And as always, welcome VS Drake. The VS Drake says that they were surprised and actually refreshed by the fact that it was not so grandiose with like crazy tools and gadgets. It was, yeah, it was like spycraft. And in fact, why don't we use what Storm Reed said? Uh, and well, combined with VS Drake about him being a real person, such as the big wager. So, what did you think about like the audacity is the wrong word, but the I guess the betrayal of Bond is the type of a character that would uh, make such a big wager, knowing what we know that he knew. I guess. So, like, yeah, what do you think about this particular portrayal of Bond as a gambler? I guess.
Yeah, Bond the gambler, like obviously Casino Royale is our introduction to James Bond. And for like the first half of the book, it's just James Bond is winning at what he's doing. He's doing awesome. There's hot women all around him. He's winning every gamble he takes. He's up millions of francs, and he's absolutely nailing exactly what he needs to do. And um I really enjoyed that Fleming was like, all right, so he's gonna be there, and then just gonna hit him with a crap hand, and he's just gonna lose everything, and he's gonna be like, oh shit, what do I do now? Like, it's all gone. um it's I think it's classic Bond to be like, I'm going it alone, and I'm gonna do this all on my own. And I feel like Casino Royale did a good job for portraying it as a team effort. Like,
Mhm.
MI6 trusted him with the 20 million francs, and he had expectations, but he wasn't there alone. He had backup. Other agents were there and wanted him to succeed. And obviously, the Americans bailed him out, and they're like, yeah, here you go. Here's your next wager, right? Um, so, it was kind of cool to see James Bond work with others, or stand on the backs of his counterparts to reach up for the goal.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. Is that he in this version, Bond, yeah, he's gambling, but he also knows what his resources are. He's very calculated about what he does. He knows what he can fall back on, what he can't. They talk very much about the like financials of where it's all going to come from, like the specific amount of money that he needs to gain or lose in order to bankrupt Lashif, you
Yeah.
know, and what that would mean for him. I mean, the money is weird because in this book, like, I have no idea what a franc is worth and what a pound was worth in the 50s. I know pound sterling was kind of like the premier note, like worth, it's still worth more than the euro, but at the time, this is still pretty well height of the Commonwealth. And, there's, so when they're talking about like 30,000 pounds sterling or something like that, it's just like, I trust that's a lot of money. um, for the time. But yeah, so 20 million francs but is that now or was that 1958? I have no idea. We're talking post World War II. So, but I think Fleming did a good enough job writing it so that we understood that it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it was also kind of cool to see the calculation of it, that there was something happening outside of the game that made the risk seem like the kind of risk that a trusted spy would take, not this, like you said, lone wolf, maybe we can trust him, maybe we can't type of character, you know?
Yeah.
So this Bond is very much like a professional. Like he's a sleuth, but he's a professional sleuth. um, so I thought it was cool to see those elements too, and to see multiple agencies working together, like you said, a bit more directly than what we see in the other movies, because again, you know, Bond actually has to have a team and not just Q and M. Speaking of which, do you have anything that you want to add or
Yeah, yeah. I do. I do have a question. Question. All right. So I'd say Bond's biggest flaw in this book is that he didn't see his love interest was a double agent. Um did you I mean it's kind of hard because the movie does the
yeah.
same thing. But did you see any hint of it in the book? Did you see any foreshadowing that she was a double agent?
Um, I kind of did, but it was not necessarily that she was a double agent in the way that she was. So there's points in the book where it's pretty subtle, but she just is in the right place at the right time with the right information in a way that seemed more competent than just what is she basically like a secretary in this book or something like that. Um,
Um, she definitely
or
worked for the agent, but she wasn't like action agent. She was like
Yeah,
a
she was like an analyst or something that would work with like a CIA agent or something. Like she is not like a full-on agent herself. And I was just like, okay, so she's super competent, so maybe she's got some extra training or something. Uh, it was interesting also in how she was portrayed as a person, because I have a lot of thoughts on that in general, like as on her character in general, but as a secret agent, I thought it was a cool choice to make her. It's a choice that seems to fit the era, right? Is to underestimate the woman next to you,
yeah.
and she played that part, and that sounds like the kind of part that, according to that era, a hyper competent spy would be able to play without drawing too much attention. And if that was the goal, then well done. Although I will say, unless we want to get into this deeper later, but like I will say, I did kind of miss the character from the movie where she was his intellectual equal, as opposed to being treated for most of it like just the woman who was swooning.
Yeah. Yeah, so Vesper Lind, I looked up her name because yeah, we're good at names. She was a treasury agent or treasury
Okay.
operative.
Yeah.
Um, so she was like a full-blown agent. She just wasn't one of the murder agents, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking out for it. I was waiting for clues throughout the book to see like, oh yeah, she's totally gonna betray Bond, like she's working against him. And I gotta say, I think Fleming did a fantastic job of hiding her actions like crazy well. Like
Mhm.
the only things I really noted were like what you said, where she kind of knew things that maybe she shouldn't have, and
Yeah. But you kind
um
of chalk it up to like, well, maybe she's the liaison of the information, and that's why she's there. But
yeah. And the only other thing I got were the moments where she would hesitate, like she was uncomfortable at dinner or she was standing nervously in the room. Like there were behavioral cues that she was not at ease when she should be at ease because things were going well for Bond.
Mhm.
Um, and especially the moment when she got the letter to go meet outside and get kidnapped. Like I feel like that was a good foreshadowing moment of like she shouldn't have done that. She should have known better. Like if she wasn't a double, she would have been like, "Yo, let's go talk to him together." And like
Yeah, she definitely did. She definitely was a subtle character in this in a way that I wasn't expecting, because her character's subtlety is very different from what we knew from the movie that came out when we were effectively like in our formative years of taking in entertainment.
yeah.
you know uh but why don't we talk a little bit more about Vesper, because we got some stuff in the chat about how Stormy says didn't Bond fall for her rather quickly. VS Drake takes it at face value, and Stormy said that he thought that Bond would pursue. Sorry, she would pursue Bond more than she did. What did you think about that dynamic, like the romantic dynamic between Vesper and Bond?
Yeah, I'd say like um obviously Vesper had a boyfriend throughout the whole story that we didn't know about until the end. I feel like that played pretty well into the story where she was kind of holding Bond at arm's length and not getting emotionally involved and just kind of there to play her role and keep him close, keep him interested, but not like too interested. I feel like her character was drawn in a way where that made a lot of logical sense, knowing what we know about what was going on at the time. Um, I do feel like Bond's like all of a sudden crazy infatuation with her at the end was like, holy cow, like uh crazy impulsive. And is that just like he's a spy, so he makes impulsive decisions kind of thing? Or like he's a young spy, so he makes impulsive decisions and was ready to ask her to marry him after they sleep together one time?
Yeah, that I had the same reaction. I was just like, man, for a character, especially because leading up to that moment, it's just about how much he wants to sleep with her, but she won't let him, and he's like, I must have her. And like
Yeah.
uh it just that part was the weirdest part in this book to me. Like, it kind of makes sense if it didn't feel fully fleshed out, I guess. It makes sense in the context of like where she went, but for Bond, I know some of it is supposed to be about learning who to trust. We see that a bit more explicitly in the movie, but like there are things that he overlooks, like what Stormreed said with the phone calls and him not following up on those phone calls more didn't feel like the Bond that like we are used to seeing. And I think that's where you start to see kind of that this is where Ian Fleming is kind of cutting his teeth a bit on this book, being the first one. Is there are some of these ideas that have a lot of potential weight to them, because if this is a, you know, another spy, okay, of course it took another spy to outdo Bond, somebody who was, exceptionally skillful as well. But we don't really see a lot of that in the book of where she's that, hyper competent. It just kind of happens at the end. Whereas, and again, not to compare too much to the movie, but the whole movie, we see how Vesper is his intellectual equal. She
Hmm.
can keep up with him in charm, in what she knows, and her ability to observe people and understand them, because she's the only person who sees him for what he is. Whereas in this book, she is the only person that he doesn't see.
Yeah.
Really. And it's a very different read, but like one, and it's really strange because of like how the ending goes. It felt like, yeah, despite having less from her, it felt like there was a more emotional weight to the ending of the book. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but it felt like that to me. I mean, it's always a little more brutal when it includes suicide, even if it is because of blackmail. But that was something that she did because she loved him, and you know, not because she loved somebody else or because she was preserving something. So
Yeah.
it kind of, the everything kind of, their love felt like backwards justified, and that felt a bit weird to me, because it's like very heavy emotional ending, but like hard for it to feel as earned as it could have been.
Yeah. You know, I think Fleming had an idea of where he wanted the story to end, and to me it felt like he just kind of got it there, and he was like, I'm there, okay, whoo, made it. Like, it didn't feel like like he ran out of story to get to the ending that he wanted, so he just kind of wrote it down. Um, and he kind of talks about that a little bit in his
Mhm.
afterword, where he's like, you know, I felt like if I went back and read it again, I would hate it and would just tear it up, and I wouldn't finish it. So I didn't look back at it, and I just kind of pushed through until I was at the end, and then I was like, oh yes, I'm there. And I feel like that does kind of read through in the end, where it feels like, he just goes, I need Bond to be in love with her and want to marry her, and he's there, and um she's dead, and she confesses, and whew, the end. What I will say though is one thing I liked about how he portrayed Bond's reaction to the letter he received is, it I feel like he did a really good job of addressing how you would feel in that moment, where it was kind of like, is he mad because he would have forgiven her if she had just talked to him? Is he mad because of the betrayal? Is he mad because he wanted to kill her if she was, because of the betrayal? Like, so many different emotions were going on, and all he
Mhm.
has to say is, "Well, fuck my life plans, I guess. I'll be a spy now."
Honestly, like I think it was all of those things. Like his anger was all of those things, and I think that's why that moment hit so hard. And I think that's why I liked that ending a bit better, is because of that insight we get into. I think we get more insight into Bond's flaws because of how Vesper is portrayed and their romance is portrayed. Is like you talked earlier, he has some impulsive instincts. He uh has some anger issues when it comes to women. I mean, like he ends the book with the bitch is dead. I mean, his ability to like he uses anger to push emotion aside. We learn a bit more about his inner world, and not just through his manipulation of other people.
Yeah. All right.
Uh
VS Drake is offering us $1 million to answer his question. So let's answer his question. That's how I read that comment. I don't know about you.
Is it $1 million each via Drake, or do we have to split it?
He's gonna
One hand of baccarat.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I'm no James Bond. I can't gamble that much.
You and via Drake. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
All right. How do you feel the story? How do you feel the storytelling held up standing next to someone like John Scalzi, similar author for a similar time? Um, how did the story hold up over the years? How did he compare to other authors at the time?
Um, I would say being the first book there, I can see how how this opened the door for Ian Fleming to go on to write. I think there's like 11 books in this series or something like that.
Well, 12
Um,
in some miniseries, yeah.
yeah, but like if you consider the context of this being in the Cold War, in the midst of like McCarthyism and spies abounding, I think this book was perfectly written for that era of, especially starting off, and Bond feels like it like a character that somebody could be if they just had the resources that he does, you know? Because it's not it's not even as crazy as like when Q gets introduced and there's a bunch of gadgets and gizmos and things that help him do stuff. I mean, yeah, he's got a really nice car and a crazy budget, but mostly he just like reads people, gets the girl, and is a fighting badass. And and I think it was perfect for that area. As for now, I think it comes off as a little bit tamer than I think it would have back then, just because we know what Bond can do, and it's really hard to separate those things. Yeah, definitely Storm Reed. That's a good way to put it. The movie definitely helped the popularity of the book and not vice versa. So it is one of those things where having somebody come in and really give it a stage, like for people to be introduced to this particular one. Plus, it's also really weird because even the movie for this book is very tied to when it came out. Like this book, the main villains are, a Soviet spy uh, contingency that or contingent that are very akin to like the KGB. But in 2007, we're talking 6 years past 9/11, it's just this random terrorist group, you know? and and I think that is kind of the thing about Bond, is that his skill, I think that is a strength of this book being as simple as it was, is, and I think Stormreed said this earlier, is he is just competent at everything that he does. And creating a character that is their greatest strength is adapting makes a character that can fit into anything so long as spies can exist in that world.
Yeah.
and it's a simple brilliance to it, really.
Yeah, I thought so in comparing to other books of the time, um I feel like this was definitely a passion project for Fleming where he had an idea and he wanted to get it out. And I think that reads through where it's like he wrote his story that he wanted to write. He didn't write a story that he thought would sell to people. Um and um being other people other than Fleming, I feel like that is a bit of a mark against the book just because I'm not Fleming. This wasn't the book for me. But
Hmm.
um comparing it to similar works of the time, I think the language of the book holds up really well.
Hmm.
um he wrote it in a very flowing way, and it was extremely straightforward, like I mentioned earlier tonight. Which I feel like is stuff that's on par with other authors of the time, other than maybe like some crazy Shakespearean uh diverge into the wood-esque type authors. Um but yeah, it was a nice. Um I feel like I feel like it holds up, but only because we know that it took place in a time where the gadgetry wasn't available, the GPS stuff wasn't, the online banking wasn't a thing, and all
Hmm.
of the modern information gathering technology just doesn't exist. And I think that honestly makes it a little more romantic for a spy story, just because it relies on the old methods that we see very early on in this book, like you mentioned, with like the hairs and things.
Or hiding the check behind the door plaque.
Yeah. Or like if it was a
or the fact that it was
2026 book,
or the fact
you
that it
know.
was a check in the first place.
Yeah. If it was a 2026 book, he would have just taken a picture of it and then shredded it, Oh yeah, I
No,
cashed it.
it
Cashed
would
it
have been
hours ago.
it would have been crypto. Oh
What'd you
man,
do
but
with your 40 million francs? You mean my 80 million francs? No, I mean your 20 million francs.
just two people on computers going back and forth at each other. Totally different series. But yeah, I think you're right. And V.S. Drake also mentions that it is, it's that simplicity of it that I think you put the nail on the head by calling it, gives it a romantic element. And that romantic element does make it feel a bit more timeless. It's accessible. Nothing feels like something you couldn't understand if you were reading it from a different era, as long as you have some kind of general knowledge of the era that it came from. And you really only need to know a few things about it. Is that we're pre-computer, like surveillance era, pre-internet, and middle of the Cold War. So like that, and if you have those notes, you kind of can get a good. You can get something out of both the adventure part of the romance and the romance elements. And Stormy says the books get better as the series progresses, more background and better villains. To that point, very briefly, what did you think? It's hard to talk about Bond without talking about the Bond villain. What did you think about the portrayal of the Bond villain, the chief?
uh yeah, you know, one of the interesting things I think about this book is the call out that Bond was made right from the get-go. Like they knew he was a spy. Bond knew they knew he was a spy. And Lashif stayed there anyway to be like, fuck you. I'm gonna do what I came here to do. I'm gonna take my money. one way or another. You know? um, I I think that that plays out really well for a Bond villain kind of story where um the villain is just absolutely focused on their end goal and is willing to do whatever it takes to get there.
Mhm. Um, for me, I think, yeah, it kind of felt like in this one that Lashif was just the middleman. You know, I mean, we're used to seeing the Bond villain being this like almost cartoonish character of evil, you know, in the movies, like, and he does have that, you know, the inhaler thing, and you know, he has like something that stands out that's a little off kilter, but it doesn't really feel like the true Bond villain in the way that I think we're typically used to. So it's been it. I thought it was like a very interesting, and this is the other thing that stood out to me is Ian Fleming kind of maybe cutting his teeth a little bit on this book. You know, that he's this is the first Bond book. Is this villain was, yeah, he was smart. He mentions that he's his code name is basically the Codex, just in various different languages is his alias. You know, like that's supposed to just inherently make us think that he is um evil, but like the closest thing, the bit where we start getting into him starting to feel like a Bond villain is that torture scene, and that felt a little like, I'm with you. I read it earlier, Storm Reed. That was a rough read, talking about like it's bad enough in the movie when you're watching him getting the giant rope slammed into his nuts, but like the detail in which it was described, I was not prepared for in the book. It just all out of nowhere just gets so brutal. And, and I was just like, that didn't feel like, I mean, that felt like the defining thing for Lashif in this book, whereas, you know, in the movie, he's portrayed as somebody who is like an expert mathematician, like he is a, you know, he's a another genius that Bond is being put up against, who happens to also have the same torture tactic. Whereas Lashif in the book feels more like he's the guy trusted with the money because he's got connections, and he also happens to be a sadistic fuck, you know? So it was very different kind of seeing, it's kind of interesting seeing that evolution, or that, you know, change in what we think of as a Bond character, a Bond villain. And I thought that the villain felt like arguably the weakest bit, because like you said, this felt like a very strict, here's the mission, and it was more about how do we get it done and less about how do I subvert the villain, you know,
Yeah,
specifically. Yeah, he was a henchman villain via Drake,
a
you know.
henchman villain.
Yeah, he was, but even in the movie, he's kind of treated like that. But in a way, this feels a bit. The book felt a bit more appropriate for him being a henchman. You know.
Plus, I guess what we find out about Vesper and the hidden Russian interests in uh, how far they were willing to go to make sure that Lashif won his money. Um, you know, that I guess that does kind of lend to him being just the guy who's in the right position to get the money that they need for shit, you know.
Hmm. Oh, exactly, and that's, yeah, that's why, like, even in my intro, I just called him a money man, because that's more or less how he was treated in this book. He was a money man who was sadistic and worked for the Soviet spy agency. Like, pretty simple. Uh, but Stormy says that they liked him. Uh, because he was so much like Bond. And there is an element of that in the way that they talk to each other. Of it felt like a meeting of peers in a way, and that element was kept. And I think that is kind of important for Bond to feel like the villains are meeting him eye to eye to a certain extent. Or if they're going to be condescending, Bond's job is to subvert it. You know, like
Yeah.
that feels very classic Bond.
All right. Are we ready for final thoughts? Any last minute topics to throw in there?
Nope, I think we covered the main things I wanted to. So why don't we get into those final thoughts? Would you like to start or would you like me?
Colonel, I can start.
All right.
Um yeah, I had high hopes for this book. Um just because it's, 007. It's the origin story. Knowing that it was the original 007 story and that this was going to be Fleming's introductory work into the world of being an author, and uh I kind of figured it was not going to be the best Bond book ever. Um but knowing that, it had a lot of good aspects to it. I really liked the intricate details of spy work, like the hairs and the hiding the check behind the placard, and um having the government's backing to throw another 32 million into the pot to keep the game going. All of that shit read very, very well in Fleming's favor for, I think, how it should go down as a spy agency trying to take down another spy agency. Um, However, what I struggled with this book is the spy stuff did drop off in the middle, and it became a gambling book. And it became just kind of chit chatting about gambling, and all of the intensity was about whether or not Bond was going to win the next hand. And um, you know that part kind of lost me. The gambling, it doesn't interest me at all. Um, and the fact that this book focuses heavily on gambling was probably always going to be a problem, but um, the amount of time that we spent just talking about baccarat hands was, in my opinion, excessive for how short of a book we had. And of course, like I said earlier, the ending felt a little rushed, although did thoroughly enjoy the emotions that were portrayed flowing through Bond at the end. And I feel like it did set the stage for a much wider 007 future.
Well said. So I would say I think this was a perfect pick for a beach read. We've done a lot of like romance types, but this is very much that page turner. But there are moments where you could pretty easily set it down, and it's short enough that if you wanted to just blaze right through it, you could. But there are elements that make it easy to just be like, okay, I can come back to this because to your point, it felt like this book was kind of cut into three different books, like three different little novellas. There's the pre-casino, the casino, and then the aftermath. And it would be very easy to just quickly read through each one of those sections and get through it. Um, my favorite part was, like you said, the first part where we actually get into the spycraft of it all, seeing how these agencies interact, how they track their people down, what it was like back in that era. I think the weakest part, arguably, are the characters themselves until essentially the very end. Um, like, even Bond felt a little more simple than I was used to, but part of that can, like you said, just be him, Ian Fleming, kind of just getting used to the character and figuring out what kind of character that is. Bond felt a little less super secret agent and a little more just kind of guy with a lot of resources who happens to be good at gambling. You know, uh, it was cool seeing little gadgets like the gun and the cane show up as well. You know, these little things that feel like just outside the realm of what a normal person would have access to, which makes it feel, you know, it gives it that like fantastical romance adventure element, especially when you take it to, you know, all corners of the world and, you know, ordering beluga caviar and champagne. So I think it did a good job of setting the tone for like the world that Bond lives in and creating a kind of like a foundation base for a character for Bond that sounds like from Stormreed gets really built up. So I think ultimately my final thoughts are that good beach read, take it with a grain of salt because you lose out on, you know, more compelling characters that you might have seen in the movie. Like again, Vesper. I wish we had a little bit more of her before the very end, which might have lent more weight to that emotional impact. But good beginning, solid ending. Like you said, bit slow through the middle, but if you can get through the Baccarat stuff, then I think it's, you know, worth it. And also trying to ignore the misogyny, because that's just straight out of the 50s.
Yeah. Well, cool. Let's Storm gives it a thumbs up for the creation of James Bond. Hard to
Yep.
argue with that. Uh, let's talk next books. Next up on the docket, we already know about is Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett. It is a 20-hour audiobook, and we are going to be doing this in 2 weeks. So if you haven't already, get a cracking before it's too late.
Where am I supposed to find a Kraken at this time of year?
Oh man, walked right into that one. Okay. August 1st, Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett. It is book 3 in a series, in case anybody doesn't know that.
Yeah.
After that, September 5th, we're gonna do The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Grossman?
Yeah.
Grossman?
All right. And after that, in October, we are going to be doing our horror month. That is our horror romance books. So if you have any suggestions, get them to us quick, because otherwise we'll post that list for voting as soon as we can. And then into November, we're going back to the basics. So that's right, everything 800s. If you have suggestions, let us know. And as always, December will be our redemption arc. So books that we have voted on, but were not voted in to the lineup.
Cool. Side pieces?
Side pieces. Okay, so I was way wrong about the Horus Heresy. There's way more books than I thought. The essentials don't cover the actual thing that I wanted to know for more than like a couple paragraphs. But I managed to make it through 5 more of the books. Because they're very easy to turn on while I'm working and just get right through them, even if they, you know, they're not books that I feel like I have to like go back and reread every single little thing as long as I catch the big notes. But yeah, so I've had those 5, and I too started reading Project Bounce House. So
Nice.
what about you?
So speaking of 5, I read uh I read He Who Fights with Monsters 1 through 5. I kind of jumped in with both feet there and just kind of um just took it in. I don't think He Who Fights with Monsters is quite on par with a lot of the books we've read lately, but it is entertaining and long. So yeah,
Yeah.
five 5 books is probably, I don't know, 110, 120 hours. So yeah, long. Anyway, I did that, and then I also started Foundry Side in preparation for Locklands. I'm gonna have to do some crunching to make them all in time, but I think I can do it. Sounds like Via Strake read. Oh, you already said he read Project Bounce House. And some spicy books. Curious, what spicy books? What spicy books did you read, Via Strake? Also, thanks for joining us tonight, Storm. Hope you're still here to hear me say thanks for joining us. But anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It was a good discussion tonight. Kind of cool to have it with James Bond and the beach read. Good little summer discussion. So thank you everybody, and we'll see you next book.
Oh, okay. Yep, sure. See you next book, guys.